You with Gordon Arnold. It's June 6th, 1989. We're in the Dallas County Administration Building. Okay. Mr. Arnold, I would like to hear your comments on the assassination of President Kennedy, where you were a witness, and then a few more questions for the Oral History Archives collection that the Foundation maintains in conjunction with the sixth floor exhibit. This material will be stored in the archives for the use of future historians.
Yeah, my name is Gordon Arnold. Uh, I guess one proper way to identify me would be my Social Security number, which would be 460-603-447. My military number was 18674-627.
What branch of the military?
And I was in the United States Army. I was in for 3 years. And on that particular day, or that particular morning, I was going to be going to Fort Wainwright, Alaska the following week. And my parents had bought me a brand new modern camera to make movies with. And it was a 3-turret lens camera. And it had all the modern features. It was all wind up, and for those days it was a high dollar camera. But that particular morning I came downtown to take my mother to lunch, and I was coming in from Oak Cliff, and I noticed all the people lined up like it was going to be a parade. So I thought, well, I got a new roll of film, why don't I test the camera before we leave, see if it works. So I came around the depository building and found a parking place. Well, it was just on the other side of the tower over there. If you remember, there used to be railroad tracks. Pretty well filled up the area. But I parked the car.
About what time?
And I don't know.
Morning?
It had to be morning. It was before noontime. I honestly don't remember the time. But what occurred was, I was thinking, man, if I can get on the railroad bridge, I got myself a good shot of whatever's going to come by. And if you wonder in your mind why I didn't know the president was in town, is because in the military training that we had, we weren't allowed to read newspapers, listen to radios, nothing like
You
that.
in basic training or a
No,
special unit?
I was in a special unit. And it kept us away from current affairs. And so when I was home on the leave, its old habits are hard to break, so I didn't read newspapers, didn't listen to the radio, didn't watch television. I was running around too much. And so I started over towards the bridge, and I got down to the very corner where there's a drainage ditch, and I threw my leg over the iron railing, and just about the time that I did that, a man in a suit come up, and he told me that where did I think I was going. I told him I was going on the bridge to take pictures. And he told me I couldn't, and I said, you and who else is going to stop me? Because at that point I figured I could whip any 3 people on earth.
How old were you then?
About 23.
How long had you been in the military?
I had been in the military for approximately 9 months at that point in time. And when I went into the service, I couldn't even do 1 push-up. And when I got out, as my wife now tells me, I had no neck. I weighed 175 pounds, and I was nothing but muscle. And I didn't care about anything at that point in my life. And he showed some identification and said he was with either the CIA or Secret Service. And I told him, that's good enough for me, I'll back off, leave him alone. So what I did was, at that time, you had smaller trees out here, and the picket fence was all together.
At the knoll. Mm-hmm.
And what I was doing was I was walking down the fence line, trying to see where I could get another good advantage shot to take pictures from. And I found one that I thought would work, and he come up and told me again to get out of the area. And I said, well, horse rots, I'll just go around it and get on the other side of the fence. I'm away from his territory, I'm in mine now. Get on the other side, and man, everybody's in good positions to take pictures. But old Gordon here, so. The big problem is that there used to be a directional identification billboard out here, and it was just past the lamppost on the well, if the street's going east and west.
Elm Street.
Okay, now you've got a walkway that comes up, and just east of that is a lamppost, and just east of that is where that stupid billboard was, and that blocked all taking pictures of anything coming around the corner. And so I had made up my mind to, at that point in time, they were putting dirt on the knoll. There was a mound of dirt, and I said, well, I'll stand on the mound of dirt. And I was doing some practice pan shots.
Where were you standing in relation
Okay.
to the steps at that time?
Okay, the steps would be almost, I would say in front of me, but it's not in front of me because I'm standing askew to the steps, more towards the street than I am the steps.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm about 3 feet from the fence.
Between the steps and the fence?
Yes.
So the steps were east of you?
Right.
Okay.
And I honestly still didn't know what was happening until, well, the motorcade came around
Mm-hmm.
the corner and made the S turn
Mm-hmm.
to go west.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, that looks like the presidential flag. And I still really wasn't convinced, but I put the camera up, had it all wound up, and just as the nose of the car started to come into my viewfinder, I pulled the little switch on, and just as I was starting to pan and I was almost parallel to the street, it's when I want to say noise, it's not a noise. You feel something go past you, and then it's almost instantaneous. You'll hear a noise follow right behind it. And to me, I knew I was dead because that was a bullet that just went over me. And it's not a span of time that this occurred in. This happened, what I'm telling you, it's all in one sequence. Because when the shot went past my ear, I was automatically falling. And when I was falling, I was still the camera was still running. And I could see the president's head go back. Now that's the last that I remember being on the camera. But when I went down, I literally went down, and you're taught to roll,
Mm-hmm.
to get down as deep as you can and away from the fire. And I would say that another shot went over the position that I was in. But when that occurred, I was down. I had my face I had rolled over once, and my face was now down, and the camera had quit running at this point in time. Okay. At that, it seemed like eons, but it's not. A short period of time right after that, somebody kicked me in my derriere, and now I'm not in the mood to be kicked to begin with, and I was upset because I knew the president had been killed, and I turned over and I was ready to hit somebody, and what I was facing was a large bore weapon, and the man was crying.
What do you mean by a large bore weapon?
It's like a shotgun, but it looked like it was big enough for a truck to drive through. And I had been told in the service, if you're going to get shot with a high-powered weapon rather than a slow-moving bullet, because a slow-moving bullet can... Well, it's what they call a dirty bullet. And he was shaking real bad. And he said, you were taking pictures. And I, in no uncertain terms, told him I was, or had been. And he said, give me your camera. And, man, a brand new camera? And I told him no. And he used some expletives to explain to me that he was going to have the camera. And I pitched it to him. And
How far away from you was he?
He was just out of arm reach, down to the barrel.
And where was he in relation to you and the fence?
He was between me and the fence.
Did you see where he came from?
No, not where he came from. But now, people were moving at that point in time. Some were running away from where I was at, some were running up the hill. What I couldn't understand is he took the film out of the camera, pitched the camera back to me, and then he came back towards along the fence line, towards the parking area.
Behind the deposit?
Yeah. And that's the last I saw him.
How was he dressed? What did he look like?
He had it looked like a Dallas police officer's uniform. And he was a white male. He had, back in those days, it's what they used to call shooter's glasses. I don't remember it was like a yellow tint to the glasses. It kept the glare off your eyes. And I forgot all about the lunch with my mother. Okay.
How old a man was he?
He would have been in his, well, he wasn't much older than I was. I'd say in his late 20s, early 30s.
Build?
He was a little bit taller than I was.
Which is?
I'm supposed to be 5'10" and a half. He was not fat. He had a ruddy complexion. He was stocky. Okay. Hair color was dark.
Curly or straight?
To be honest with you, I don't know if it was straight or curly. But the one thing I do remember about him is he had dirty fingernails. Because I was watching it. Believe it or not, I was watching the trigger finger. And with him shaking like that, it was going back and forth, and it just shook me up.
He was crying.
And he had tears coming down his eyes. But when I left here, I got to my car as fast as I could.
Where, when your car was behind the deposit?
It was right from where we're sitting now. You know where the railroad switching station building's at? It was just a little bit further than the switching station. I got in my car and I went back to Oak Cliff, and the first thing I did was I called the recruiting station and asked them what I should do. And they said, was I under orders And I told them yes, I was supposed to be going to Alaska. They said follow through with the orders. The thing that I remember at that particular point in time, it was chaotic for the city, but it messed up my plans considerably, because the girl I was going with at the time is now my wife. And we had planned to go to the movies and that type of thing before I left, and the whole city just shut down. Now, I explained to her what had occurred, and I had explained to my parents what had occurred. When I got to, well, I left here, and we had a stopover in Seattle. I spent a night in Seattle. I explained to the officer of the day, where we were being billeted, what I had seen. And at that point he just laughed at me and told me not to worry about it. That's the last time that I ever talked about it. After that, I was reading stories that people that had provided documents and that type of stuff were having problems breathing. They were dying. And so I thought it was just better if nobody knew about it, thought I was crazy to begin with. Just let them keep thinking that and forget about it. Well, and some years later, I'm now out of the service, and I'm married. I don't have children yet. Now, while I was in Alaska...
What time frame are we?
Okay.
Are we still in the 60s?
Well, I went to the service in 66. 3 years later, I'm married. We didn't have children for 9 years, so it's within that period of time. And I had gotten my citizenship in Alaska. I'm a Canadian by birth, and my parents are Canadian. And it was so odd, because I had been called on jury duty umpteen times during this period of time, but I was never chosen because of the work that I did for the city of Dallas. And I'm an investigator for consumer protection. And because of that, they never chose me. Well, I got upset one day, and I said, I don't think it's right that for me to have gotten my American citizenship, the one thing I have never done for my country was to serve on a jury. And so they kept putting me into the pot until somebody chose me. And we were having the trial, and we were having a recess. And there was a young man there that was going to the University of Texas at Arnold. And by chance, that's the school I graduated from. I put my wife through school, and then she put me through school. And they were trying to do a history project on the Kennedy assassination. And they were having trouble trying to find witnesses, and it was taking a long time because it was either by correspondence. They didn't have the money for the telephone bills, this type of thing. And I said, do you want to know the true story? And he laughed at me and said, yeah. And I said, well, I'll tell you a story that nobody will believe. But I said, as long as it's for the class, it's something for you to discuss. So I took him out here to the knoll, and I explained basically the same thing as what I've told you. And he took a picture of me standing. And you can't tell who's standing in the picture. It came out, well, what happened is it came out in the Dallas Times Herald. And when I saw it, I just about come unglued. And so I called him up, and in no uncertain terms told him what I thought. Well, that wasn't the end of the story, because what happened is he said I couldn't help it because my boss said you were too credible a witness not to run the story. And from at that particular time in my life, we got phone calls from all over the world. And it just about drove me right up the wall. And some of them were wanting to know more information. Others were very derogatory. And I said I would never speak of the subject again. And about 3 years later, there was a man called me, and I told him in no uncertain terms I wasn't the Arnold he was looking for, this type of thing. And he sent me some documentation through the mail. And he said that he had a picture that would prove I was there. And if I would supply him with information, then I could get a copy of the picture. And I provided him some information. I never got the picture, but I got a bunch more phone calls. And by this time we'd had our son, Leslie. And I said, that is the last, absolutely the last time it's ever going to be discussed. And then there is a young lady called the house. And this was in 1986. Now I've got a son and daughter. And I have moved from my original residence. And she wanted to talk to the Gordon Arnold that was standing on the knoll when the president was assassinated. And I told her, you got the wrong Arnold. And I kept her, I guess, confused. That's a polite way of saying it. For almost 3 months. And later on, she flat told me that I was a very good liar, because they were almost positive that I was not the right Arnold. But what happened was that she turned around and got her boss, Nigel Turner, and came up to our house unannounced one night and asked if they could come in. And I said, well, you can come in, but you still got the wrong Arnold. And my wife went to make them some tea. And out of the blue, my son walks into the room. And he says, are you here to talk to my dad about the assassination of President Kennedy? About what he knows, that's what he said, about what he knows about the assassination of President Kennedy. And Nigel just looked at me and he said, you've been lying to me? And I said, it depends on which side of the fence you're looking at it from. Because in one way I'm not, another way I am. So he was trying to explain to me what he was trying to put together. And he said, you're the last link that we need to bring the whole story together. And I said, I don't really care if I'm, the last dollar that God's got. There's no story that you're going to get out of me. And he said, why not? And I said, because every one of you people lie. There's never been one that has followed through with what he said he's going to do. And he talked for about 15 minutes and he said, we can pay you for it. And I said, in essence, that's an insult. I said, I have not looked at any tapes. I have looked at notebooks. I've read nothing on the article. I don't want to know any more about the article. The man's dead. Let him rest in peace. And my son was sitting across the room listening to this. And he said, well, Dad,
How old is he?
He's 14.
14.
And, well, at that time, I guess he was about 12 when this first started. And he said, Dad, I need to ask you a question. He said, this will probably be the last time in your life that you have a chance to tell the world what you know. And he said, even if they lie about it, he said, you will have done your part to let people know what happened, to know the truth. And I said, well, I'll do one thing for you, son. I said, I want to prove to you that what they do, they're lying. And I said, I'll tell the story one more time. And I said, I don't want to ever hear about it again. I said, after I'm dead, y'all can take whatever papers you've got, do whatever you want to with it. But I said, I'm going to prove to you that they lie. And Mr. Turner and I think her name was what, Susan? Both assured us that they were going to follow through on their part. We came, excuse me, we came down here and we shot for, goodness gracious, it must have been about 4 hours. And then we shot at our house, and then he wanted me back down here again. And what he was concerned about was, where was I standing? And I honestly told him, I said, it was 25 years ago. I said, the whole place has changed. There's no sign to look at. The trees were probably smaller at that time. The grading's different. I said, you can see the roots of the trees now where before you couldn't. I said, the fence, I don't even know if it's in the same location or not. I said, even some of the trees have been cut down. And I said, for me to stand up here and tell you I was standing here, I cannot. I can show you approximately where I stood. And they filmed it that way. And they asked me to wear light clothes. And matter of fact, the shadows were basically the same. And I didn't know until later that they came back themselves on the same day of the year and used the original Polaroid camera and took a picture of Nigel standing up there. And they could not find him in the Polaroid. And then they took it back to England, or at least they're telling me they took it back to England and had it processed electronically and drew his picture out. And the reason I'm saying this is because through the whole interview, in my mind, there was no way they could prove or disprove what I was saying. So in essence, my family was protected or safe, or whatever way you want to look at it. And for the last half hour of the filming, he gave me a piece of cardboard and he said, now don't turn it over till we tell you to. And he said, part of it's going to be covered, part of it's not. You tell me what you see. And I thought that I could make out look like a person in a military uniform, in a summer weight uniform, wearing an overseas cap, which I was at that time. And you can almost make out the 3 turret lights. And that would have been the same style camera. But the body wasn't standing straight. It was like he was tilted. And he said, well, pick up the sheet and look at the rest of the picture. And it took me a second to for my eyes to focus in. And I said, that's the man that shot the president. And there was another individual in the picture. And I said, that's the railroad hat of the man that was standing by the rails out here. And the CIA man asked me to move. And he asked if I was sure. And I said, I was very sure. And at that moment, when I saw that, for some reason, I remembered the face of the individual. And they have never shown me a picture of the face.
What did he look like?
And, well, if you have the tape, he's in the tape. And what upset me was, as I told Nigel at that time, if I'd have known they had this picture, I would never have consented to the interview, for whatever reason. Because that means that I could be the only person in the world that could actually identify the man behind the fence.
You mean he was one of the French terrorists?
Well, they told me not to worry about it because he was dead. And he died in Mexico. Well, sometime later, we got a copy of my total interview, plus a copy of what they had put together. And the same face came up again. And I got on the phone and called him in England. And I told him, I said, I know that's the man. And they made a flight over here. And they said, don't look at the film anymore. Just shut it off. And I said, well, I didn't go back and look at it, but I know that's the man. And they brought some pictures over. And it wasn't just the individuals that I was saying, but it was like a mugshot deal. Now they all looked basically, had the same type of features. And he said, can you tell me which man it is? And it didn't take me 30 seconds to pull him out. And I pulled out a second picture. And he said, well, who's that? And I said, that's the man that's in the hard hat. And he said, are you sure? And I said, you're never sure of really anything in your life. But the one picture I am. The other man, I'm semi-sure. He said, okay.
You mean the dark-haired man?
The dark-haired man I know.
Mm-hmm.
Now they had French-sounding names, and I don't even recall what they were. And I jokingly laughed at him, and I said, now they know who I am. And I said, I don't mind dying, but I don't want my folks to be involved in it. And he said, it won't come to that. He said, I don't want to say any more to you because I need to get this information back to some other people, and we'll see what comes out of it. And the only other contact I've had with Nigel is that Susan called us. She was in Florida, and they said that they had broadcast that film all over Europe, and it was coming up for an award. And I asked if they had published it in the United States, and they said no, because the American broadcasting company wanted to take the film and change it, and Nigel would not consent to it. So at this point, I have to eat my words. There's at least one person out there that said what he was going to do about it. that lapse of time that you're talking about, if it would be no more than 30 seconds. Because, in all honesty, at that point in time, there was a lot of police officers up or coming up the hill or were on the knoll. So it would not hit you as somebody having run up so fast ahead of everybody else. It was almost like the person blended in with the rest of the law enforcement officers. Because if you'll stop and remember, there was not a weapon shown until all of a sudden they realized something had occurred, and then it seemed like weapons just grew. And I think every police officer in town had his pistol or shotgun running at that point in time.
Do you recall who was on the steps or in front of you during watching the parade?
There's only really two people that are two families or two groups. I remember there was a family with either a little boy or a little girl. And the reason I remember that is because he wouldn't shut up. And the noise would just about drive me out of my mind. And the other person that I remember was that there's a man and woman standing like on I call it a railing with that cement thing out there. And they were almost blocking my view again. And that was, all I knew was that if they decided to turn a little bit, it would obscure my view some more.
Were they both up there or just one?
There was two. There was a man and a woman. And really right down below them was like sitting on the steps almost, was a man and a woman and that little kid. And that's the only ones I really remember. Because after that, all you heard was screams and people shouting. Believe it or not, I say there was 4 or 5 shots fired. I know there was 2 fired over me. But now the problem with this particular area is that you got reports going off between buildings. And if it's not being fired over you, then you really can't, it would be hard to say that other shots were fired. Do I know specifically a shot came from the book depository? I wasn't worried about it, to be honest with you. And I could not testify that a person had shot from it.
So, were you aware of shots being fired before the ones came over your head?
To be honest with you, no.
And did you see anybody behind you said you walked on the railroad side of the fence and then crossed over. Where did you cross over?
I came down to the end of the fence.
Came all the way around the end.
Right.
And then went sort of along the concrete walkway and stopped in the corner there. Did you notice anybody talking behind you at the fence area before the limousine came?
No. The only person that I talked to behind the fence was the man that told me not to stay there. Mm-hmm. I heard nothing behind there. I didn't hear rustles or anything else. It could be the fact also that I was trying to concentrate on this new piece of equipment, make sure it worked right, that I had the right lens on. There's no sense in using a telescopic lens because the double, what do they call those things? Highway sign was blocking my view. Should I use a wide angle lens because with a proximity, or just use a normal lens? And I settled on a wide angle lens. And I think the other thing that I was worried, I kept wanting to wind up my film more. I couldn't wind no more. And I think back in those days it was like 15 or 20 seconds is all it would run, and then you'd have to wind it up again. But I wanted to make sure I got everything in the picture. And the film that you had in there, maximum I think it's 10 to 15 minutes was all that you could get.
Was it color film?
Yes, ma'am.
8 millimeter?
Yes, Kodak. But I think I was concentrating more on the camera and what I kept saying, stupid people in front of me, because I couldn't get up to where I could see what was going on. But when I was falling, there was no bodies between me and what I was looking at, because the camera never really left the viewfinder.
And the limousine was about directly in front of you at that point.
And when the only time that camera left my eye was after I had hit the ground. And I rolled. And when I rolled, the camera was still running. So it would have taken a picture of the fence and anything else behind it. And then I rolled over on my face, and I just laid there. And I was surprised. What was it, Senator Yarborough? I think is what they said, had indicated that there was a young man that had been in the military or was a well-trained soldier or something that looked like he flew about 10 feet and hit the dirt. And that's the only part of the film that I laughed at, because I don't know how far I went, but I knew that I had nothing to shoot back with. Best thing to do is get as far away as I could. And over the years, I never really had thought about it. I guess I'm semi-blessed with the fact that I can block things out of my mind. Maybe it's a good thing that I didn't look at other films or read books on it, because if I had, your version of what occurs can become clouded, and then you believe what you read, you saw. It's like how many people for a Super Bowl, it's only 50,000 people can be there, yet 200,000 people said they were there when the Dallas Cowboys won the Super Bowl. And I never really wanted to put myself in that type of position. The other thing is that I never really wanted to talk that much about it, because nobody really believed what I was saying. It's just a crazy person who didn't know any better, and just trying to make a name for himself. And what's ironic about it is I didn't really care. My son and daughter now know about it. They don't discuss it. My son wants to, he's going in the 9th grade this year, and he was asking if he could use part of my experiences as a expose for his history class. And I had told him that we had promised that if he'd done something like that, it would be given to the society down here. Because it would be almost what is it, an autobiography of I was there type thing. So if he ever writes it, I'll try to get copies so that he'll sign it, copyright it, and send it down to him. But I don't, know anything else to tell you. I'm just a regular fellow. Really, if anything else to tell you, because I just happened to be at the wrong spot at the right time. Now, if you really stop and think about it, if I had been like 10 more inches to the left, they'd have had to have shot me first to kill the president. But that's, that just wasn't meant for me to die at that point in time. And sometimes you stop and think about it. If I had have been, would he still be alive?
This is the end of the interview with Gordon Arnold, recorded on June 6, 1989 in Dallas, Texas.